Hello, folks. Today we'll take a look at this deck. This is a deck from Worlds 2010, and the runner-up for this Worlds was Casey Annis. I hope I pronounced this name correct. So today we'll make a breakdown of this deck, and then I'll make a couple of games in the next video. So let's take a look at it. I've made a couple of plays already, and I also made a couple of modifications of my own that I'll show in a minute. But let's see what this deck is about. First, it's a movie block deck. This means it plays with cards from the first 10 sets from 1 to 10, and it uses sides from the King's block. So meaning this side with the crown above the side number. So to start with the fellowship, the centerpiece of this fellowship, I think, is this card, Elven. So the ability of Elven is that during the skirmish phase, you can exert her and choose an opponent, and that opponent must wound a minion for each wound on each minion that is skirmishing Elven. So for example, if you have a minion skirmishing Elven with 3 wounds and you exert her, your opponent must make 3 wounds to his or her minions. This is extremely powerful ability because as you'll see, most of our decks is tailored to make wounds, and Elven can very well capitalize on that by exerting herself and clearing what's left of the enemy minions after the archery phase. Not only that, she can do it twice and really clear our way for moving a second time during our turn. I think Elven also is so powerful that I think she was nerfed by the player committee, and there is a nerfed version of Elven. Let me check. Yes, here it is. So the nerf, if you play the player council nerf list and this format, the movie block with PC, you will find this Elven that can trigger her ability only once. So the limit is once per turn, unless you can spot another Rohan man. We, of course, in this deck, we cannot spot another Rohan man. So that's why we're playing with the original version of Elven. So what else we can see in the deck? Another prominent figure is, in my opinion, is Aragorn. Aragorn, this version of Aragorn, as you can see, when you play him, you can heal another companion, and also at the start of each fellowship phase, you may exert a companion of one culture to heal a companion of another culture. This is very, very powerful in this deck because, as you can see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 cultures, including Frodo, and you can redistribute wounds very easily between them. You can very easily exert Frodo, who is not supposed to be included in skirmishes very often. He's just here for his high resistance. And you can heal either Elven to use her ability again, or Aragorn, or Legolas, or even Galadriel and Gil-galad. Each of them has very useful exert ability. So this Aragorn is a little bit expensive. I think it's the most expensive version of Aragorn. It's cost 5 Twilight, but it's well worth it for these two abilities that are very, very synergistic with the rest of the deck. And he's quite high. He has quite high power and health. As you can see in the deck, there's a lot of support for him. There are 2 Argon balls that give him archer and ability to exert himself to wounding minions. We have the ranger sword to boost his power, and we have the Saga of Elendril to boost his health. The rest of the companions, we have 4 more companions. All of them are elves. And now the question is, who is the other starting companion along with Elven? Who can support her best in the starting fellowship? So, as far as I know, KC played this in his starting fellowship with Legolas. Of course, he's a very powerful companion. He has a very useful ability to clear minions at the right moment. However, I will make a case that I usually don't play with Legolas as a starting companion, and I will try to explain why. So the thing is, Legolas is great because he's an archer and he can, right at the start, make wounds to enemy minions that Elven can capitalize on. However, we're playing 4 Elven bows in this deck that can make each of your other elves an archer. So we have 3 other elves and 4 Elven bows. So at the beginning of the game, if we draw at our starting hand or of the few first turn an Elven bow, but we don't draw any of our Elven companions of these 3, we have just the dead cards in our hand. Because Legolas is already an archer, we don't have a good target for this Elven bow. And also another reason, I don't know why in the deck there is Guemigil, if I pronounce this correctly. This is the hand weapon, but it's a hand weapon only for Arwen. And Arwen, if Arwen is in our deck, we don't have any certainty at what point we'll draw her and whether or not we'll have Guemigil after that, or we'll just have a mismatch of these 2. So that's why that's one of the reasons for me to start with Arwen. And the other reason is that if I have an Elven bow in my starting hand, I can make Arwen immediately an archer and be on par with, at least partially, with Legolas. So if I start with these 2 ladies, I will have the powerful ability of Elven and Arwen as a kind of a tanky character, and she can become immediately an archer if I happen to draw an Elven bow. Also, Guemigil will never be a dead card in my hand. So that's why I like to play Arwen as a starting character. Other changes, let me actually open my version of the deck. Other changes that I've made to the deck, I've added 1 more copy of Aragorn, and I think this is necessary because Aragorn is so powerful for this deck, and he has a lot of cards that are supporting, especially him, like the bow, this knife of the Galadrim, which is wounding minion during skirmish, and his sword. So if you don't draw Aragorn on time, you have quite a lot of dead cards in your hand that you have to discard, or otherwise they are stuck in your hand. Another change that I've made is I've actually removed the Defiance event. This is a skirmish event that gives your elf strength +2 or +4 if you're skirmishing a Nazgul. I'm not sure what's the reason Casey run Defiance. Probably it was a meta choice. Probably there were a lot of Nazgul decks at the time. But and maybe he was just scared of the Nazguls, and probably this deck weakness is especially against Nazgul, I don't know. But I decided to run something a little bit more versatile. I decided to run Valor, which is making an elf strength +2, so the same effect, but um, it can make an elf +3 if it's skirmishing a wounded minion. And the case with this deck is that we will almost always have a wounding minions against us, so this will almost always be +3 strength. Another addition to the deck are the 2 copies of Company of Archers. So why Company of Archers? Because as you can see, the original deck doesn't have any kind of condition removal, and I think if you're playing for in not defined meta, you have to have some kind of condition removal in order to deal with some specific strategies. Actually, another change that I'm planning to make is maybe include another copy of Brego, because Brego is another card. It's a mount, it's a possession that is very synergistic with this deck. It can be, to play it, you have to spot Rohan man, which Elven is, and bear must be a man or an elf or wizard. So actually, all of our companions can bear Brego, and when you play it, you may heal the bear, which is just perfect with all the exert abilities that are going on. And at the start of each skirmish involving the bear, each minion skirmishing bear must exert. So quite standard ability for all Rohan mounts. But here, this is especially powerful with the ability of Elven, with the ability of Arwen. Um, it's just another wound, another automatic wound that can trigger most of our abilities. The rest of the deck, we have a little bit more healing with Elrond. It's quite standard ally, and it's quite powerful for his healing ability. We have the mount of Arwen, Asphalot, which make her just a little bit more tanky. Um, we already talked about the Elven bows, um, the Aragorn bow. We have, of course, the Elven sword, which is quite powerful. It gives her strength +3, so she becomes quite beefy, and it can be played as a skirmish event, and also when you play it, you may wound the minion Elven is skirmishing. And the rest are quite standard stuff. Eyeglass for more vitality, uh, the ring, the ring of Elrond for more vitality also, and 4 copies of double shot to increase our archery. So what are the strengths of this fellowship and what are its weaknesses? I think it's quite obvious by now. It's a wounding fellowship, and it's called rainbow wounding because it includes a lot of different cultures. Usually the wounding fellowships are primarily elves, but here we can use a lot of the other culture strengths, and the main purpose is to not let many minions skirmish with our companions, to kill them either in archery or in the skirmish phase with Elven. So this clears our path quite well, our path forward, so we can jump quite easily once or twice per game. So enough times that um, we can run ahead of our opponent. As weaknesses, I can spot that if because we have such important central figures in the face of Elvin and Aragorn, if we lose any of these characters, it will be quite tough for us to continue. And we're running a little bit on the low end of companions, so it will be quite hard for us to recover if we lose a companion or two. We have to be very careful for any wound preventing events, for any companions basically that can survive and wound us or overwhelm us. This fellowship is not very suitable for pure head-to-head fighting. So we have to try to kill as much minions as we can. So moving to the shadow side, as you can see, these are Nazguls, and these are a particular kind of Nazguls, enduring Nazguls. So the keyword enduring means whenever this minion has a wound, it is strength +2. So the original version play 4 of each. I think these are quite one of the strongest Nazguls, but the centerpiece for this deck is LOTR Inquia. So Inquia says that during the skirmish, you can heal Inquia in order to add a burden. Pretty straightforward, and one of the ways for this deck to finish an opponent, and often quite an opponent that is quite low on resistance, is to corrupt them. But this, I think, in my opinion, this was not the main purpose of this shadow. Yes, we can add burdens, but Inquia is the only way for us to add burdens. So we should try to play an Inquia at least on each of our shadow phase. Do not discard your Inquias if you play this deck. Try to play one each shadow phase so you can capitalize on this ability. So why actually do we want to place burdens to our opponents, apart from trying to corrupt some of the low resistance fellowships like the Knights with Isildur or the Elves with Galadriel? We try to place burdens because of this condition. So Gates of the Dead City says that first you play to play it, you have to spot a Nazgul. Then each time a Nazgul card adds a burden, the free people player must exert a companion. So as you can see, if we stack 1, 2, or more of these conditions, the ability of Inquia becomes quite powerful. With each burden, the free people player must exert 1 or 2 or more of his companions. Another mini combo of this deck are these conditions, and this is banned on discovery. This condition says that at the beginning of each of your shadow phase, you may draw a card. This is good, of course, for have more options during your shadow phase. And the second ability is at the end of each shadow phase, you have to exert a Nazgul or discard this condition. This at first look seems like a disadvantage. You have to exert each time one of your Nazguls, but actually with the enduring Nazguls, it becomes quite an advantage because you can send your Inquia or each other of your enduring Nazguls to battle with 1 or more wounds already on it. And of course, you can capitalize on the skirmish ability during the skirmish. Another way to add wounds to your Nazguls is this event, an assignment event between Nazgul and Prey. It's quite powerful, that you can probably judge by the cost. It's for Twilight, it's not cheap. However, you can exert your enduring Nazgul minion twice to assign that minion to an unbound companion. So you cannot assign it to the ring bearer, but actually you can do quite a lot of damage with this event, assigning your enduring Inquia to characters such as Legolas or some other utility companions that the free people player usually don't want to fight. And these Nazguls become quite big. So if, for example, they have 2 wounds on them, they become 15 strength, which can easily overwhelm squishy characters. Um, so burdens and exerting companions are 2 angles of attack of this deck, but also, as I said, it's quite possible that you can overrun a few characters um, because of endurance and because the rest of your Nazguls has fears. Like Lyrin Nelia has enduring and fears. During skirmish, you can heal her to add 1 for each burden. Um, and Kantia, Liar Kantia, it's also enduring and fierce, and you can heal her to discard a possession borne by a character he's skirmishing. So these Nazguls also have useful abilities, but the main thing is with the burdens of the Inquia, and you can use this on depending on situation, the rest of the Nazguls, and try to wound more characters, try to overwhelm them. Um, we also play one copy of Ulari Tuldea. If you already have 4 burdens, you can assign her um, to a character, who you wish. And Ularia Atea, if you have initiative, you can assert her and spot another minion to add a burden. So a few more ways to add burden. We have one copy of Ihil Stone that let us exert an Nazgul. So this is quite useful to make her then bigger and use their abilities. And it has the same ability as Bent on Discovery, that you can draw additional cards. So this deck actually draws quite a lot of cards. Um, you can draw sometimes 2 or 3 additional cards per shadow. Um, we also play All Blades Perish, which prevents a Nazgul to take a wound. It's quite useful against archery, against all kinds of nasty surprises, because your Nazguls are quite often fighting on low health. And 2 copies of Out of Sight and Shot. This is primarily played to be able to play your Nazguls from the discard pile, and as I said, you have to try to play your Inquia each and every shadow phase, so this is helping with that if you don't have an Inquia right now in your hand and you have one in your discard pile. The other ability is also very useful. Each time a companion is played, the free people's player must exert a companion, which adds up with our City of the Gates of the Dead City. So that's the shadow. It's quite powerful. I've made just few changes to it. I've just removed 1 copies of Kantia and Nelia because they are not so centerpiece for a deck, and of course they are unique. So if you have uh, 2 or more copies of them in your hand, you're quite stuck to play just one of them. And I included Ulairo Otsia, I suppose this is how you pronounce it, which is also enduring and fierce. Uh, ability is useful sometime, but it is cheaper, and you just have more variety in what you can play in case the free people player give you a little bit of more Twilight to work with. I've also added 1 copy of Ring of Rancor. Um, I'm testing it right now. It seems quite useful with this additional 1 vitality that is giving to your Nazguls to work with for their exerting and enduring purposes. 1 copy of the ring draws them, so it has the same ability. So at the start of each shadow phase, exert a Nazgul or discard this condition, so you can exert your Nazgul, but instead of drawing cards, it's just adding Twilight to your pool for each burden you can spore each time the fellowship moves. So it is actually supporting the quite heavy cost between Nazgul and Prey. And one copy of Redder Reddit in Shadow, which can which is serves as an additional shield against an archery fellowship, which can be quite tough for our Nazguls because they have to exert and they are quite low on health. The archery can make a lot of trouble for us. And that's the shadow phase. As I said, it's quite tough against wounding fellowships and archery fellowships. So that's why you have ways to prevent archery and wounds. But it's quite powerful because you're attacking at several angles. You're attacking with burdens and trying to corrupt the ring bearer. It's quite possible. You try to exert the companions, and also you're trying to overwhelm some of them. What about the side path? It's quite standard for the movie block, and for this deck, we're playing Rohirrim Road, which give us an option to exert an elf to make the Twilight cost just a little bit more tough for our opponents to play condition and possessions. We're playing West Road, just a standard side, nothing specially for us. Hall of the King is another site that is quite standard. Palinor Prairie, so we can exert a minion, which is quite useful for us, and remove a burden to make 3 people player discard conditions. So it's a condition removal that we are lacking actually on our Shadow side. Minas Tirith 7 Circle, which is healing elves. Osgiliath Crossing, which can exert minions, quite useful for us, and it's quite check for if the fellowship is playing more companions, 6 or more companions. Morgul Dwin, which is quite useful for Nazguls, although we are not adding threats. We can sometimes use this ability. And Slack Mounts. So as a last site, each time we kill a companion, we can add a burden, so we can quite easily at the last site corrupt the ring bearer. And that's it for this deck. Check the other video where I will play few games with it. Thank you for watching and take care.